The following is an unedited bonus clip from Alinéa's interview with Ming Tsao, in which he discusses the background and mechanics behind his 2017 piece, Refuse Collection.
When I did this refuse collection piece, it was, I don't know if you know the basis of that piece, but basically I took Schoenberg's Begleitsmusik zur Lichtspielszene, and then I transcribed that using the metric and syllabic scheme of this poem by J.H. Prynne called Refuse Collection. But it all references a film by Straub-Huillet where it's called the Einleitung, the introduction to Schoenberg's accompanimental music to a film, right? And this was, the beauty of this was that Schoenberg had deep reservations on doing this because he felt that this was when he came to Hollywood, right? And he was asked to kind of participate in some film music projects. And he was very hesitant because he felt that as soon as you begin to accompany music by an image, the image dominates. The image dominates and begins to lead us into how we hear the music. And so what Straub and Huillet do in their film, they were asked to do a short documentary on Schoenberg and this specific piece. And so what they do is they completely deconstruct the whole notion of a documentary. Because a documentary, you expect information about the author, about some kind of storyline around that, and they completely resist all of that. And they bring in a montage of scenes from the Vietnam War, from the Holocaust, and it's really to get at what Schoenberg prefaces the score as drohende Gefahr, Angst, Katastrophe, impending fear, angst, catastrophe. And Schoenberg said, when he wrote this music, he said, we can't have images to this because images would reduce the sensation of these things, which are too massive to be reduced by any given image, right? That was Schoenberg's problem with Hollywood, for example, is that you try to portray these images in a representative way through images, and then it makes it all very kind of palpable. And yes, we can understand it, we can digest it, and then ultimately we can kind of become comfortable with it. Schoenberg resists that, and that's why he then opted not to have any images with the music. Likewise, Straub-Huillet resists any kind of representational aspect within the film, that it really just becomes a site for different kinds of materials to project this notion of angst, catastrophe, fear. And then when we move to the Prynne poem, which is very much his response to the Abu Ghraib tortures, he does something quite similarly with the syntax of the English language, which is, I think, it's a brilliant poem, where basically we get this pronomial confusion throughout the work, coupled with commands to do tortures, to make sure we film it, film it for our pleasure, etc. But yet we, you, they are always being confused. And so the whole idea is that there is no representational aspect in the sense that we can claim some kind of moral position and say this is wrong. We all become implicated in it. The notion of we becomes confused with they. The notion of I becomes confused with you. And what happens is then we see this complicity between language and violence. And so then in my work, I try to do something similar. Again, the problem with Schoenberg's piece is that although he gets rid of the reference to any kind of images, he still is attached to this notion of building this notion of stable subject positions within the music. He builds a subject actually within the music that feels these things like catastrophe, fear, etc. So in a way, even though it's a highly psychologized music, it still becomes a representational form of music. And so what I do is by taking these gestures and putting them into a kind of meter and rhythmic scheme, oftentimes having irrational measures where the tempi is constantly shifting from one measure to the other. There's never a stable position in the music where one can enunciate a gesture. especially from a performer's point of view. They can never have a long, clear sense of line in the music because it's constantly being disrupted by tempo changes and meter changes. And that way, and so in that sense, by focusing the musicians only on a very short snippets of music, a longer sense of gesture can never be attained. And that's one way in which I attempt to kind of destabilize the gestures and, in a sense, remove this notion of stable subject positions within the music.